Clara, your sister is an embarrassment. You can't honestly expect her to walk down the aisle like that. People will stare. That's how my wedding died, not with a fight, but with a sentence. Corey's tone was smooth, reasonable, even like he was offering a helpful observation instead of shattering 4 years of trust. His mother, Marjorie Brooks, sat across from us, stirring her tea with quiet satisfaction, as if this had been the plan all along. The seating chart lay between us, little paper squares representing the life I thought we were building. That was before I realized one of us cared about love and the other cared about optics. My name is Clara Evans. I'm 32 years old, and until that night, I thought I was marrying the kindest man I'd ever met. We'd been together for 4 years, lived together for 2. The wedding was 3 months away, a rustic barn venue, 150 guests, candles, and linen lavender and eucalyptus, the kind of perfect that photographs well. Marjorie lived for appearances like that. She was the kind of woman who said we when referring to her son's career and who never missed a chance to remind me that presentation is everything. I used to laugh it off. I told myself love could balance the difference between sincerity and performance. That illusion ended the night she pointed her diamond-ringed finger at my sister's name on the seating chart. "Darling," she said sweetly, "we need to talk about Anna's role in the ceremony." I frowned. What about her? Marjorie's eyes darted to Corey before she spoke again. "It's just, the processional is long. The photos, the attention, it might be too much for her. Perhaps she could do something more comfortable, like reading a poem." "Comfortable," I repeated. Corey cleared his throat. "She means maybe being maid of honor is a bit much for Anna. There's a lot of walking standing at the altar. It could be exhausting." I put my pen down slowly. "Exhausting for her or embarrassing for you?" He winced. "Clara, come on, that's not fair." I stared at him. "Say what you mean, Corey." He hesitated, then sighed. The kind of sigh that sounds like logic but smells like cowardice. "It's not the image we want, okay? It's supposed to be elegant, not what I demanded." He glanced helplessly at his mother. Marjorie finished the thought for him, her voice soft but sharp as glass. "Sweetheart, your sister limps. She speaks differently. People won't know how to react. It's not the atmosphere we want for a celebration." For a second, the room tilted. I heard her words. Limp speaks differently atmosphere, but they sounded far away, as if coming from underwater. I thought of Anna, the little sister who'd survived being hit by a drunk driver when she was 15, who'd spent months in a coma and years learning to walk again, who sent me corny memes every morning and told me not to settle for anyone who didn't make me laugh. I looked at the man I was supposed to marry and realized he'd never laughed with her, only tolerated her. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like my own. "You're right, Corey. It's not the atmosphere I want either." He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up. The chair scraped against the wooden floor loud enough to make him flinch. "It means thank you for the truth." He looked confused as I reached for his hand, sliding my grandmother's engagement ring off his finger. "Clara, what are you doing?" I placed the ring on the table, ending this. Marjorie's mouth fell open. "Don't be ridiculous. You're overreacting." "No," I said quietly. "I'm reacting exactly enough." I turned toward the bedroom, my pulse steady. Behind me, Corey's voice cracked. "You're throwing away everything because of her." That word "her" was the final nail. He couldn't even say her name. I shut the bedroom door behind me and exhaled. The silence that followed was suffocating, but it was honest. For the first time in months, it was honest. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and began dismantling my future. First the venue. Canceled, $5,000 deposit gone. Then the caterer, $2,500 down the drain. The florist, the band, the photographer, each email sent with clinical precision, each cancellation cutting. Another thread between me and the version of myself who believed Corey was good. When I finally stepped out an hour later, the living room was chaos. The seating chart was in shreds on the floor. Marjorie was gone, her perfume still hanging in the air like a ghost. Corey sat slumped on the couch, eyes red. "Clara," he whispered, "I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to protect you from embarrassment." "Whose embarrassment?" I asked. He looked up desperate now. "You know how people are. They judge. I just wanted the day to be perfect." I stared at him for a long time. "Then you should have chosen a perfect person, not me." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. "You need to leave." "What, you're kicking me out?" "My name's on the lease," I said calmly. "You have 30 days. His face twisted with disbelief. "You're insane. You're destroying our life together." I shook my head. "No, Corey. You destroyed it when you confused cruelty for honesty." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned away before I could see him break. The night outside was silent. Streetlights spilled pale gold through the window, catching the faint shimmer of the engagement ring still lying on the table. I watched it for a long moment, then closed the curtains. Some people think the end of love comes with heartbreak. For me, it came with clarity, cold, steady, and terrifyingly peaceful. And in that stillness, one truth cut through everything else. If a man can look at your family and feel shame, he will one day look at you the same way. The morning after I ended my engagement, the world didn't collapse. The sky didn't darken. No thunder, no chaos. Just stillness, the kind that follows an explosion after your ears stop ringing. Corey was gone when I woke up. He'd taken his watch, his phone, and the last of the coffee, but his cologne still lingered on the pillow, that faint woodsy scent I used to love. Now it made me nauseous. I sat up, staring at the sunlight pooling on the floorboards. It felt obscene that the world kept moving when my life had split in half. Then, like the project manager I am, I made a list. Contact landlord. Change passwords. Cancel wedding contracts. Tell Anna. The first 3 were easy. My fingers typed with the kind of calm that only comes when emotion's been burned out. But number 4, I dreaded that one. Anna picked up on the second ring. Hey, sis, are you okay? You sound weird. I forced my voice steady. I'm fine, just... Things with Corey didn't work out. Silence, then her gentle, trembling voice. He didn't hurt you, did he? No, I said, just showed me who he really is. Anna didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She'd always had this uncanny instinct, the kind that knows when to speak and when to simply breathe beside you. I'm coming over, she said. Anna, you don't have to. Clara, her tone sharpened. I said I'm coming. She arrived half an hour later, hair slightly messy, holding 2 lattes and a bag of croissants. When she saw the bare ring finger on my hand, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I never liked the way he looked at you, she murmured, sitting beside me. How did he look at me? Like you were a project, something to polish, not to love. That's when I cried. Not for Corey, but for the version of myself that had mistaken control for care. By noon, my phone had turned into a battlefield. Texts from Corey. Corey. Clara, please. We can fix this. Corey. I didn't mean what I said. Mom got in my head. Corey. You're being cruel. Corey. You owe me half the deposits. Then calls from his mother. I ignored them. Until one came through labeled private number. I made the mistake of answering. Clara, this is Marjorie. Her voice was sugar-dipped in venom. I'd appreciate if you stopped spreading lies about what happened. I haven't said a word, I said. Well, someone has. My social group is asking why the wedding's off. I've told them you had cold feet, but you might want to stick to the same story. For your dignity. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. My dignity's fine, but your conscience seems to be struggling. Her tone turned icy. My husband and I have invested nearly $12,000 into this wedding. Non-refundable deposits. We expect reimbursement. There it was, the real priority. Money, image, not people. I took a breath. Marjorie, I canceled because you and your son tried to exclude my sister. The wedding failed because of your condition, not mine. I won't be reimbursing you for your cruelty. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. You called off the wedding, and you made that decision necessary. I ended the call before she could respond. By evening, I had created a new document on my laptop, file name Damages and Debts. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, something tangible to hold on to when emotions blurred. I logged every expense I'd paid, the deposits, the utilities, the groceries. Then every item of his I'd replace if he damaged mine out of spite. I knew Corey. He wouldn't leave quietly. Sure enough, the first sign came 3 days later. My favorite coffee mug, the one Anna had custom designed for me, was shattered in the trash can. Then my Spotify account started playing breakup songs in my car. Petty, predictable, painful. I didn't confront him. I just took pictures, documented everything. Calmly, methodically. A week later, an email arrived. Subject: financial settlement. It was from Corey, formal tone, bullet points, and all. He demanded reimbursement for $12,000 in wedding expenses, his parents' contributions, half of our apartment security deposit, continued payment of car insurance until he got back on his feet. I almost laughed. The car was in my name. The lease was in my name. The only thing that had ever been in his name was my trust, and that was long gone. I poured a glass of wine, opened a new email draft, and began to type. Subject: clarification on financial matters. Corey. As I've stated to your mother, I will not be covering any expenses related to the canceled wedding. The decision to terminate the engagement was the direct result of your and her exclusionary behavior toward my sister. Regarding the apartment, you are not on the lease and have never contributed to rent or utilities. You have no claim to the security deposit. However, I've attached a spreadsheet outlining your unpaid share of utilities for the past 24 months, totaling $3,150. Your portion of the deposit may be applied to this balance, leaving you with $300 owed. The car is registered and insured solely in my name. I will terminate the policy in 14 days. Please secure your own insurance if you intend to continue driving it. Finally, your 30-day notice to vacate expires July 20th at 5:00 p.m. After that, eviction proceedings will begin. Regards, Clara. I CC'd Marjorie and her husband for good measure. The silence that followed lasted 6 hours. Then my phone lit up not with apologies, but with fury. Corey, you're insane. Corey, you're making me homeless. Corey, my dad's calling you. He can't believe this. His dad never called. But Anna did. She said, you sound lighter, like you can finally breathe. Maybe she was right. Because as I shut down my laptop that night, I realized something. I wasn't surviving a breakup. I was reclaiming a life that had been slowly, quietly taken from me, and I had no intention of giving it back. By week 2, the apartment didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a chessboard. Every object, the couch, the framed photos, the kitchen utensils became a pawn in the quiet war between me and Corey. He stayed, of course, pretending he hadn't received the 30-day notice, leaving his shoes in the hallway and his dirty coffee cups on the counter like a challenge. But he didn't talk to me anymore. His silence was its own kind of noise, smug, heavy, poisonous. Still, I wasn't afraid. I had something he didn't: documentation. Each night after work, I opened my laptop and updated damages and debts, the spreadsheet that had become my armor. Every broken mug, every stolen charger, every missing towel went into a line item with dates and costs. Under another tab, I listed unpaid utilities, screenshots of old texts. Can you cover Wi-Fi this month? Promise I'll send it next week. He never had. Numbers, unlike people, don't lie. But the ledger wasn't just about money. It was my way of taking control, turning chaos into order, heartbreak into math. On Friday, Anna came by with Thai food. She limped a little less these days. Her physical therapist said she was finally walking with balance instead of effort. When she stepped into my apartment and saw Corey's things still there, she frowned. He's still here. Not for long, I said, closing my laptop. Anna took a sip of iced tea, watching me carefully. You always process pain like an accountant. I smiled. It's either this or burn everything he owns. She laughed a soft, relieved sound. Then her voice turned gentle. You didn't lose love, Clara. You uncovered the truth. That's rarer. I nodded, but the words sat heavy in my chest. Because somewhere underneath the anger, I still missed the man I thought he was. The next day, Corey decided to test boundaries. I came home to find my closet door open and one of my dresses, the one I'd planned to wear for our rehearsal dinner, lying crumpled on the floor, streaked with coffee. Next to it, a sticky note in his handwriting, accident. I didn't confront him. Instead, I added dry cleaning, $38 to my ledger, photographed the note, and filed it under petty damages. That night, I lay in bed listening to him laugh on the phone, a loud, performative kind of laugh, meant to be overheard. Every sound in the apartment felt like bait, but I refused to bite. He wanted chaos. I gave him calm. 3 days later, I got an email from his mother. Subject: urgent legal notice pending. I rolled my eyes before opening it. Inside was a poorly written paragraph, threatening formal action unless I reimbursed them for wedding deposits and emotional distress. It ended with, "We hope to resolve this amicably." I replied with one line, "Marjorie, please direct all further correspondence to my attorney." I didn't have an attorney. Not yet, but they didn't need to know that. The following weekend, I came home to find Corey in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, a smug smile on his face. What I asked. He looked up, just posted something. On instinct, I opened my phone and saw his new status. Some people show their true colors when money's involved. Guess I dodged a bullet. Hundreds of likes, comments full of sympathy. A mutual friend had even replied, "You deserve better, bro." I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't defend myself. Instead, I called Betty, one of his bridesmaids, one of the few decent ones. When she answered, I could hear the awkward guilt in her voice. "Clara, I saw his post. I didn't know what really happened until now. Is it true what people are saying? What are they saying? That you canceled because you didn't want to marry into his family. I almost laughed. Close enough. I didn't want to marry cruelty disguised as family. Silence on the line. Then she whispered, "Good for you." That night, Betty texted me a screenshot of a group chat between the bridesmaids. One of them had written, "Clara was always cold. Maybe she's just jealous of Corey's family." Betty had replied, "Jealous of the woman who called her disabled sister an embarrassment, grow up." I stared at the screen for a long time. For the first time since this all began, I smiled. 2 days later, Corey tried another tactic. He sent a long, self-pitying text about how he couldn't afford a new place yet and needed more time to get back on his feet. He ended it with, "You wouldn't throw someone out on the street, right?" I typed back, "You have until July 20th at 5 p.m. No emotion, no explanation, just the truth." Then I added his message to my ledger under the tab labeled Manipulation Attempts. When I shut my laptop that night, the apartment finally felt quiet. Not peaceful yet, but something close. I sat by the window, sipping tea, staring at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Corey was probably scrolling through comments, searching for validation. But me, I had something better than sympathy evidence. Evidence that I had loved honestly, that I had walked away cleanly, that every cruel thing they said would eventually collapse under the weight of documentation and truth. I glanced at the spreadsheet one last time. Line 73. Emotional damage incalculable. I smiled faintly and closed the file. He thought this was a breakup. He didn't realize it was an audit. By the third week, Corey finally stopped pretending we were reconciling. He didn't leave, not yet, but the way he looked at me changed. Gone was the desperate, apologetic ex-fiancé trying to fix things. In his place stood someone colder, calculating, rehearsing a new role, the victim. And I could feel it, the shift. He wasn't trying to win me back anymore. He was trying to win the audience. It started small, like a drizzle before the storm. A few of our mutual friends suddenly unfollowed me on social media. Then came the vague, pointed posts on his account. Some people pretend to be kind, but cut you down when you're vulnerable. Guess I learned who really cared about me when things got hard. The comments were predictable. "Stay strong, Corey. She doesn't deserve you. You'll find someone better." It stung, but not because I cared what strangers thought. It stung because I used to be one of those people, someone who would have believed his version of events. The next morning, I walked into the office and immediately felt it, the change in atmosphere. 2 coworkers whispered near the coffee machine, their voices dropping as I passed. Someone had told them. Corey worked in marketing. His friends worked in marketing. And marketing people know how to build narratives. At lunch, my friend Jess slid into the seat across from me, eyes full of quiet concern. "I saw some stuff online. Are you okay?" I sighed. "Depends on which version you read." She leaned closer. "He's saying you left him over money, that you took his car, his deposit, everything." I smiled faintly. He forgot to mention the part where he called my sister an embarrassment. Jess's eyes widened. "He what?" "Yeah," I said softly. "That's the part that didn't make the highlight reel." She sat back, disgust flickering across her face. "People need to know that." "They will," I said, "but not from me." I wasn't interested in revenge by algorithm. I wanted the truth to spread the old-fashioned way through quiet, undeniable reality. That evening, I got a message from Betty the bridesmaid, who'd sided with me early on. "Betty, hey, Clara. Just wanted you to know Corey's spinning this crazy story, but I told everyone what really happened, including what he said about Anna. People were horrified." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My throat tightened. I typed back, "Clara. Thank you. I didn't want to drag anyone into this. Betty." "You didn't. You just told the truth. The rest dragged themselves." 2 days later, Corey retaliated the only way he knew how, through disruption. I came home from work to find the apartment lights all on the fridge open and his things scattered everywhere. Boxes half packed, half destroyed. He was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone. "Hope you don't mind," he said flatly. "I had some friends over earlier. We were talking about how crazy you've gotten. I didn't rise to it. You have 10 days left." He smirked. 10 days, until what you call the cops. "If I have to," I said calmly. He stood up, closing the distance between us. "You think you can ruin my life and just walk away?" I met his eyes steady and unflinching. "I didn't ruin your life, Corey. I just stopped letting you ruin mine." Something flickered in his expression, fear maybe, before he stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a cup of cold tea, scrolling through his latest posts. He'd uploaded a picture of himself looking heartbreakingly sad in our living room, captioned, "Sometimes you give your whole heart to someone and they turn it into a spreadsheet." The comments were full of sympathy. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just pity. He still needed an audience. I didn't. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop instead. New entry in damages and debts. Line 89, emotional labor, unpaid, irrecoverable. Then just beneath it, I typed, note. He's trying to weaponize pity. Don't engage. I closed the file. A few days later, I met Anna for lunch at a little cafe near her office. She wore a blue sundress, her cane propped against the chair beside her. When she saw me, she grinned. You look less like someone's ex and more like yourself again. I smiled. I've been practicing. Halfway through lunch, I felt my phone buzz. It was Betty again. Betty, you might want to check Corey's latest story. He tagged you. My stomach tightened. I opened Instagram. It was a selfie of him holding a box of his things. The caption read, evicted by the woman who once said she loved me. Heartbroken, #betrayed. My jaw clenched, but before I could react, Anna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Let him post, she said. Let the world see his version. The truth doesn't need hashtags. Her voice was steady, unshaken, and in that moment I realized she was stronger than anyone in his entire family combined. The next morning, I called a locksmith and scheduled the appointment for July 20th, 5:30 p.m., 30 minutes after his deadline expired. I stood in the doorway watching as the locksmith's drill hummed and metal filings scattered like glitter. It felt symbolic, the sound of one chapter sealing itself shut. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the door handle rattled. Corey's key no longer worked. He banged on the door. Clara, open up. This is insane. I opened the door just wide enough to look him in the eye. Your belongings are packed and safe, I said. They're in a storage unit 1 mile away. Here's the key. He stared at me shocked. You what? I handed him a small envelope next. Inside is a cashier's check for your half of the deposit. I decided to waive the utilities you owe. Consider it a clean break. He blinked disbelief, morphing into fury. You think this is over? You can't just buy me off. It's not a buy-off, I said. It's closure. He clenched his jaw. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. I already regretted staying. Then I closed the door, slowly, deliberately. His voice echoed through the hallway, a blend of rage and panic. I didn't listen to the words. Instead, I turned toward the empty apartment and took a long breath. The silence that followed wasn't sad. It was earned. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel like walking on eggshells. It felt like space. It felt like mine. When the banging finally stopped, the apartment fell into a silence so deep it almost hummed. I stood in the hallway, hand still on the doorknob, pulse steady. On the other side of that door, Corey's world had just cracked. On my side, mine had just begun. I didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, I walked through every room of the apartment, our apartment now half empty and echoing with ghosts. The couch where we'd planned our honeymoon. The kitchen counter where he'd proposed. The closet that still smelled faintly of his cologne. Each corner felt like a lie that had finally confessed. I gathered the last few things he'd left behind, a hoodie, a toothbrush, a watch he'd forgotten, and dropped them into the donation box by the door. By the time I finished, it was midnight. Outside the city was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you realize you've been holding your breath for too long. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, not to drown the pain, but to toast the ending. The ice clinked against the glass, soft and deliberate. I raised it slightly toward the door. To honesty, I whispered. 2 days later, an envelope appeared under my door. No note, no sender, just a thin white envelope with my name scrawled in Corey's messy handwriting. Inside was a printed email draft, a legal notice he'd never sent. Subject: breach of promise to marry. Damages, emotional distress, financial loss, reputational harm. Below that, a handwritten line in pen. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I laughed, out loud, sharp and disbelieving. The old me, the one who used to smooth every argument to apologize for other people's cruelty, would have shaken at that note. But the woman standing there in her own apartment holding a piece of paper from a man who'd shown his true face, she just smiled. 3 days later, Corey's mother called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. Clara, it's Marjorie. We're terribly disappointed in how you've handled things. We had such high hopes for you. I suppose some people just don't have the emotional maturity for commitment. It's sad, really. Sad, yes, but not in the way she meant. I deleted the message and added one final note to my spreadsheet. Line 107, emotional manipulation attempts ceased. Then I closed the file permanently. That weekend I went to visit Anna. She'd been painting again a new collection of digital art pieces for a design exhibition. She looked up from her tablet, smiling when she saw me. Hey, stranger, you look lighter.
Do I said, smiling back.
Yeah, like someone cut the strings off your shoulders. I sat beside her watching the colors blend on her screen, soft pastels turning into something bright alive. It reminded me of the kind of beauty that doesn't need permission to exist. Do you ever think people like Corey know they're cruel? I asked quietly. Anna tilted her head. Maybe. Or maybe cruelty's just the only language they were taught to speak. I nodded. Well, I've stopped listening. That night I got one final message from Corey. A text that read, I hope you're happy destroying everything we built. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it was solid. Then I blocked his number. Over the next few days, the quiet became my new rhythm. No more slammed doors. No more passive-aggressive sighs. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. I started noticing small things again. The sound of my own footsteps, the smell of coffee in the morning, the soft buzz of my phone that no longer made me flinch. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with fireworks. It slipped in slowly, quietly, like morning light through the blinds. One evening, I walked past the mirror near the front door and stopped. For months, I'd avoided looking at myself too long. Now I met my reflection head on. No ring, no doubt, no apology. Just me. And that was enough. Before bed, I lit a candle, lavender and cedar, the same scent we'd chosen for the wedding that would never happen. I let it burn for a moment, watching the flame dance, then blew it out. Not as a ritual, not as revenge, just closure. Because the truth was simple, Corey hadn't broken me. He'd freed me from a future that would have killed me slowly, one polite compromise at a time. And as the smoke curled into the air, I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to him, but to the woman I'd been when I thought love meant tolerance. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming across the bed. The city was alive again, people laughing, traffic humming, life moving forward. So did I. Because that's what healing really is. Not fireworks, not revenge, just the courage to start breathing in a room that's finally your own. For a while, silence became my peace, until the letter arrived. Thick envelope, heavy paper, from Brooks and Lane, attorneys at law. I smiled before I even opened it. Corey and Marjorie had finally made good on their threat. Inside was a letter full of righteous phrasing and empty teeth, breach of promise, emotional suffering, reputation damage. They wanted $12,000 in wedding costs plus a public apology. I read it twice, then poured myself coffee and opened my laptop. I hired an attorney for 3 hours, just enough to draft a response sharp enough to make their egos bleed. We didn't argue. We documented. Attached were a copy of the apartment lease, only my name listed, screenshots of Corey's texts and emails, the spreadsheet of utilities and damages labeled, settled and waived, and finally a sworn statement from Betty, who'd volunteered after hearing about the lawsuit. Her testimony was short, professional, and devastating. Corey Brooks expressed in my presence that Clara's disabled sister would ruin the aesthetic of the wedding and make guests uncomfortable. He said this multiple times. Clara ended the engagement immediately after that discussion. We attached it to the letter like a pin in a voodoo doll. My lawyer smiled faintly as he slid the papers across the desk. They'll back off. They don't want this going public. I nodded. That's not why I'm doing it. I know, he said, but it helps. A week later, their response arrived weaker, shorter, desperate. Marjorie's lawyer argued that I'd misinterpreted a conversation and that the family meant no harm. They were trying to soften the story before it spread. It was already too late. Because truth once released doesn't need your permission to travel. Betty told me later that word had gotten around among Marjorie's social circle. Apparently one of her charity friends had seen the affidavit and whispered it over brunch. By the next weekend, the entire donor committee knew. Marjorie's phone stopped ringing. Her husband stopped accompanying her to events. Their image, that shiny, perfect picture they'd built, cracked like thin glass under sunlight. As for Corey, he tried one last time to claw his way back. A text 2 months after the silence. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted things to look perfect for us. I stared at the message thumb hovering over delete. Then I typed, You succeeded. It looks perfect now because you're not in it. Blocked. A few weeks later, I got a notice in the mail, a bland white envelope from the city impound lot. Apparently the car, the one I'd bought for Corey, but never transferred, had been impounded for driving uninsured. A minor accident. His fault. Since the title was still in my name, the notice came to me. The irony was almost poetic. I texted him one last time. Your car's at Main Street impound. You have until the 30th to pay the fees. Otherwise it'll be sold. I'll sign the release. His reply came 10 minutes later. A string of profanity that ended with, You ruined my life.
I didn't respond. I just signed the release when the paperwork arrived.
A month later, the car was gone, sold at auction. The notice came through final, stamped, irreversible. I stared at it for a long moment, not with satisfaction, not even relief, just quiet recognition. Actions have consequences, and the universe doesn't forget. The funny thing about truth is that it doesn't need you to defend it. It defends itself. Corey and Marjorie tried to erase what they'd said to rewrite it into something palatable, respectable. But their world runs on whispers and mirrors eventually crack.
Meanwhile, my world had become small, simple, and wonderfully quiet.
I'd stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering what he told people, because I already knew what mattered. He had to live every day, knowing everyone had seen who he really was. One evening, Anna and I met for dinner. We hadn't talked about Corey in weeks, but halfway through her pasta, she looked up and said softly, "You know, I used to think forgiveness meant letting someone back in." I tilted my head, and now
I think it just means you stop carrying them.
I smiled. Then I've forgiven him completely. We laughed, real laughter, the kind that shakes the heaviness out of your chest. And for the first time since it all began, I realized something profound. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from walking away without needing to prove you were right. The next morning, I walked through my apartment, barefoot, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling over everything. There were no boxes, no tension, no ghosts, just me. Alive, free, unburdened. For so long, I'd mistaken control for safety, but it wasn't control that saved me. It was letting go. I'd built my peace like I'd built my ledger line by line, truth by truth, until nothing false remained. And now finally the numbers balanced.
It's strange how silence can change meaning.
When Corey first left, silence meant tension, the kind that hums in your chest waiting to explode. Now silence means safety. No footsteps pacing in the next room. No sighs meant to guilt me. No voice twisting words into apologies that only protect itself.
Just quiet. Just peace.
It had been 6 months since I'd ended the engagement. The legal noise was gone. The gossip had burned itself out. Even Marjorie had stopped pretending she was the victim once her social circle moved on to someone else's scandal. My apartment was fully mine now. The walls felt different, warmer, softer somehow. I'd repainted the living room a pale sage green, replaced the curtains, rearranged the furniture. It looked nothing like the place where he used to live. That was intentional. I was building a life that didn't leave space for ghosts. One Sunday morning, Anna and I went to a small coffee shop near the art gallery that was showcasing her work. Her limp was less noticeable now. Therapy had helped. She moved with quiet confidence, like someone who'd learned the art of surviving gracefully. Her digital paintings hung on the wall behind the counter, bright, abstract pieces full of motion and resilience. When I saw her name on the artist's placard, Anna Evans' pride bloomed in my chest.
"You did it," I said, smiling.
She shrugged, pretending to be casual. "You say that like it's over." We laughed, and for a moment everything felt whole again. Then, as if summoned by fate's cruel sense of humor, the door opened, and Corey walked in. He didn't see me at first. He looked smaller somehow. Not thinner, but diminished, like a copy of himself, with the color drained out. His clothes were pressed, his hair styled, but his eyes, they'd lost that performative sparkle. Anna saw him before I did. She froze her hand tightening around her cup. "Do you want to leave?" she whispered. I shook my head. "No, I'm done running from ghosts." Corey finally looked up and our eyes met. For one breath, time folded. The months collapsed into that first night, the table, the ring, the words that burned, everything down. Then he looked away. No smirk, no anger, just emptiness. He turned to leave, but before he could, Anna said softly, "You can stay. We were just finishing up." Her voice wasn't cruel. It was calm human, and that was somehow worse for him. He nodded, awkwardly muttered a thank you, and walked to the counter. The barista didn't recognize him. He was just another man ordering coffee. When he left, the door chimed once, and then the quiet returned. Anna exhaled. "Well, that was awkward." I smiled faintly. "No, that was closure." That evening back home, I found myself standing by the window, the same spot I'd stood in the night I ended everything. The city lights shimmered like distant confessions, each one alive with possibility. I thought about everything that had happened, the hurt, the anger, the endless emails and demands and performances, and then the quiet after the storm. That was the moment I finally understood peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly when you stop expecting applause. I sat down and opened a blank document on my laptop, not the old ledger, but something new. Title Lessons from the Fallout. And I began to write. Love without respect isn't love. It's control wearing perfume.
Cruelty disguised as honesty is still cruelty.
The people who shame your kindness were never capable of it themselves. You don't need closure from liars, you just need distance.
Peace isn't revenge. It's remembering who you were before they made you doubt your worth.
When I finished typing, I sat back and smiled. No tears, no bitterness. Just truth, simple, complete.
The next weekend, Anna's gallery opening drew a big crowd. I stood off to the side watching people admire her work, each painting pulsing with the story of survival in color and shape. A reporter asked her, "What inspired this series?"
Anna smiled and said,
"My sister taught me that surviving isn't about winning. It's about choosing yourself even when it costs everything." The crowd clapped softly. I felt my eyes sting, but not from sadness, from recognition.
Later that night, we walked home together. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the city alive around us.
"Clara," she said quietly, "do you ever wish things had gone differently?"
I thought about it: the wedding, the love, the betrayal, the peace. Then I shook my head. If they hadn't shown me who they were, I might never have found out who I am.
Anna smiled. "Then I guess we both got lucky."
When I finally got home, I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window again. Outside, the world kept moving: cars, laughter, the distant rhythm of life.
And there it was again, that sound. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of peace.